What you are looking at is a house in London. From the street, it looks like it has always looked. Georgian proportions, white stucco facade, a black iron gate, a brass door knocker, but underneath it, going down 4, 5, sometimes 6 stories into the London clay, is something that the planning permission describes as a residential basement extension. That is what the planning documents call it. What the owners call it is something else entirely. In the past decade, billionaires in West London have dug underground empires beneath their Georgian townhouses, containing a rotating Ferris wheel for a private car museum, an 82-foot swimming pool, a full-size tennis court, a salt grotto, a Roman-style thermal bathing complex with a tepidarium, a bowling alley, a cinema, a double-height art gallery, and a banqueting hall capable of seating 80 people, all of it invisible from the street above. In this episode, we are going underground. We will show you the man who planned a 5-story underground car museum on the most expensive street in Britain, and whose next-door neighbor, the French ambassador, took him to the High Court backed by the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia, Japan, Russia, Lebanon, and India. We will show you the Goldman Sachs banker whose basement excavation caused the houses next door to sink so severely that his neighbor's door frames shifted and they could not get out. And we will show you the construction digger, worth £5,000, that was deliberately buried underground and abandoned, because it was cheaper to leave it in the ground than to lift it back out. Stay until the end, because the final revelation is not about what these empires contain. It is about what building them has done to the city above, why they go down, the planning system that forces billionaires to build underground, and the economics that make it irresistible. To understand why London's wealthiest residents are digging underground empires beneath their homes, you first need to understand the planning system that is driving them there. In the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, the wealthiest local authority in Britain, you cannot extend upward on most listed or historic buildings. You cannot extend outward beyond existing boundaries. You cannot change the facade. The planning restrictions on above-ground construction in prime central London are, by international standards, exceptionally strict. But for several decades, the planning rules on underground construction were comparatively permissive. You could dig down, and in a neighborhood where above-ground space costs more than £1,000 per square foot, going underground was not merely an option. It was a financial calculation. Building underground costs approximately 3 times more per cubic foot than building above ground, according to estate agents who advise on these projects. But when the above-ground space you are adding to is worth £1,000 per square foot, and the underground space, once finished, adds comparable value, the mathematics becomes compelling. A £3 million basement excavation adds £4 million to the value of a £20 million house. You spend 3 to make 4. In a market where above-ground space cannot be added at any price, going underground is not extravagance, it is arbitrage. In 2001, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea received 46 planning applications for basement conversions. By 2013, that number had risen to 450, a 10-fold increase in 12 years. The underground empires of West London had become an industry. What is down there? The verified inventory, drawn from public planning documents submitted to London councils. Researchers from Newcastle University studied 7 West London boroughs and analyzed the planning documents submitted for basement developments between 2008 and 2017. Their findings, drawn entirely from public planning records, documented what had been approved beneath the streets of Kensington, Chelsea, Holland Park, and Notting Hill. In standard single-story basements alone, the most modest category, the approved documents recorded 638 gyms, 278 screening rooms, 52 staff quarters, 7 swimming pools. But it is the mega basements, the projects that go 2, 3, 4, or 5 stories into the ground, where the inventory becomes genuinely extraordinary. In Holland Park, a 16,000 square foot 3-story basement was approved for a private residence. It contained an 82-foot swimming pool, longer than a standard Olympic training pool, a hot tub, a sauna, a steam room, a massage room, a dance studio, a gymnasium, a wine cellar, a cigar room, an entertainment room. The project reportedly cost the equivalent of 19 million Australian dollars and took 50 weeks to complete. In Camden, a businessman whose fortune was built on Star Wars merchandise submitted plans for a 200-foot-long underground extension. The approved application included a salt grotto, a Roman-style tepidarium, and a banqueting hall with capacity for 80 diners. When the planning permission came through, the applicant reportedly punched the air in delight. In Regent's Park, Damien Hirst, whose net worth has been estimated in excess of £400 million, submitted plans for a basement beneath his 14-bedroom Victorian villa that included an 82-foot swimming pool, a yoga room, a cargo elevator capable of lifting artworks weighing 11 tons, and a double-height underground art gallery. The building above, a listed Victorian villa, untouched, unchanged. The basement below, a private museum. The Ferris wheel, the most extraordinary planning application ever submitted to a London council, and the diplomatic incident it created. John Hunt, Kensington Palace Gardens, Foxtons' founder, sold the company for £370 million in 2007. In 2015, the founder of Foxtons, the estate agency he sold in 2007 for £370 million, submitted what remains the most audacious basement planning application in London's history. John Hunt owns a mansion on Kensington Palace Gardens, the most expensive street in Britain. Average property price, £41 million. His neighbor to the left, the French ambassador. His neighbors further along the road, the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia, Japan, Russia, Lebanon, and India. Hunt's plans called for a basement extension 5 stories deep, 80 feet into the London clay. The 51,000 square foot underground complex, 55 times the floor area of an average British home, was designed to house a private car museum, a full-size tennis court, a swimming pool, a dedicated car elevator, and at the center of the underground atrium, a rotating Ferris wheel, not a display case, not a standard rotating carousel, a Ferris wheel, built underground beneath a Victorian mansion on the most expensive street in Britain. Designed to slowly rotate Hunt's collection of classic cars past glass viewing galleries so that the vehicles could be admired from multiple angles while sitting below the kitchen gardens of Kensington Palace. Hunt's next-door neighbor, the French ambassador Sylvie Berman, was not amused. Ambassador Berman cited her rights under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, 1961, the international treaty that grants diplomatic premises legal protection, and took the matter to the High Court. She was backed in her objection by the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia, Japan, Lebanon, Russia, and India. 5 sovereign nations, representing 5 global powers, united in opposition to one man's underground car museum on Kensington Palace Gardens. The French ambassador lost her High Court challenge. Hunt subsequently reduced his plans. The final approved version cut from 4 stories to 2. The original 51,000 square foot footprint significantly reduced. Whether the Ferris wheel survived the scaled-back design was not publicly confirmed. The planning application files are public. The cross-section drawing showing a rotating car display in an underground atrium beneath a mansion on Kensington Palace Gardens are, at the time of this video, viewable on Kensington and Chelsea Council's planning portal. You can read them. You should. The banker whose dig trapped his neighbors. The Goldman Sachs managing director. The sinking houses. The doors that wouldn't open. Christoph Stanger, Kensington. Goldman Sachs managing director, £10 million house. Not every underground empire in West London has gone according to plan. Christoph Stanger, a managing director at Goldman Sachs, purchased a £10 million house in Kensington and submitted plans for a basement extension. The excavation proceeded. The construction crews dug down through the London clay beneath his property, and the houses next door began to sink. The excavation displaced the clay beneath the neighboring properties. The ground shifted. The houses settled, unevenly and visibly. Door frames moved. The gap between door and frame that should be uniform became irregular. Doors that had opened freely for decades no longer opened freely. Neighbors found themselves unable to leave their own homes through their front doors. The construction had, in effect, trapped the people next door inside their own houses. The incident was widely reported and contributed to the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea's decision to significantly tighten its basement planning policies in 2014, restricting extensions to a single story in most cases and reducing the percentage of garden that could be excavated. The cabinet member for planning policy at Kensington and Chelsea Council described the basement extension phenomenon as, and these are his exact words, the single greatest planning concern our residents have expressed to us in living memory. When the single greatest planning concern in living memory in the richest borough in Britain is the billionaires' excavations are making the houses sink, you are looking at a problem with no straightforward solution, because the demand for underground space has not diminished, it has grown. The diggers buried in the ground, 5 million pounds of abandoned construction machinery, and the economics that made burying it cheaper than retrieving it. Here is a detail about London's underground construction boom that sounds invented. When a basement excavation is complete, when the underground rooms have been dug, the concrete poured, the walls lined, and the finishing work begun, the construction machinery used to dig the hole is sometimes still at the bottom of it. The excavators, the diggers, the mechanical equipment used to remove thousands of tons of London clay from beneath a Victorian townhouse. And rather than engineering a way to remove that equipment, which is expensive and structurally complicated, some contractors have simply built over it. The New Statesman magazine investigated and found that it was common practice to bury construction machinery in the ground after completing a basement extension because it was cheaper to leave the 5,000-pound machines underground than to lift them back out. The total estimated value of abandoned diggers buried beneath London's most expensive postcodes, 5 million pounds. 5 million pounds of construction equipment sitting in the ground, beneath the gyms and the swimming pools and the Ferris wheels and the Roman thermal bathing complexes of West London's most expensive homes, where they will remain presumably for as long as the houses above them stand. The underground empires of London's billionaires are, in some cases, built around the remains of the machines that dug them. It is not the house that fell down, the most extreme consequence, and what it revealed about what was happening underground. The buried diggers are an absurdity. The door frames that shifted in Kensington are a serious complaint, but they are not the most extreme consequence of London's underground construction boom. The Daily Telegraph reported that a property in London, valued at £1.5 million, collapsed into a pile of rubble while its owner was attempting to construct a two-story basement extension beneath it. The Victorian building, which had stood for over 150 years without structural incident, could not survive the excavation of the ground beneath its foundations. Nobody was hurt, but the building that had cost £1.5 million was overnight worth nothing. The incident, and others like it, prompted a series of investigations into what was happening underground in West London's most expensive postcodes. What investigators found was not entirely reassuring. The concentration of excavations on streets like Tregunter Road in Chelsea, where 21 basement extensions had been built along a single 1,000-foot stretch of road in a decade, was raising questions about the cumulative effect on the water table, the clay geology, and the structural stability of the streets above. Hydrogeologists noted that concentrated excavations might disrupt the way groundwater moves through the soil, potentially causing flooding on the surface during heavy rainfall. Engineers disputed this. The argument is ongoing, but the image that stays with you is not a diagram or a data point. It is a £1.5 million house turned into rubble because its owner wanted more space underground. What the underground empires of London reveal about wealth, space, and what happens when enough money meets an immovable constraint. Walk through Kensington, Chelsea, or Holland Park today, and the streets look exactly as they have always looked. The Georgian proportions, the white stucco, the black iron railings, the brass door knockers. Nothing has changed, except that underneath these streets, beneath the Victorian foundations, below the London clay, deeper than the water table, a parallel city has been under construction for the past 20 years. A city of gyms and screening rooms, of 82-foot swimming pools and underground art galleries, of salt grottos and Roman thermal complexes, and, in one specific and fully documented case, a rotating Ferris wheel designed to display a private car collection to viewing galleries below a mansion on the most expensive street in Britain, a city that is invisible from the surface. That generates no public benefit. That has caused neighbors' homes to sink, door frames to shift, and at least one building to collapse entirely. And that has resulted in £5 million of construction equipment being deliberately abandoned underground rather than retrieved, because the mathematics of retrieval did not work. Here is what London's underground empires actually reveal. They reveal what happens when people with effectively unlimited financial resources encounter a constraint that money alone cannot remove. The constraint: you cannot build upward or outward on a listed Victorian terrace in Kensington. The response: build downward. Spend 10 times more per cubic foot than above-ground construction costs. File the planning application, engage the structural engineers, remove the thousands of tons of clay, build the Ferris wheel, and if the digger gets stuck at the bottom, pour the concrete over it and move on. The above-ground City of London is a place of strict rules, historic preservation, and architectural continuity. It looks now almost exactly as it looked when Victoria was on the throne. The underground City of London has no such constraints. It is where money goes when the rules run out. The Georgian facade is untouched. The Ferris wheel is 5 stories below it, and the digger that built it is still down there. Next week on Blood and Sterling, we come back up to street level, and we go inside the clubs where the people who own these underground empires meet each other. The private rooms in Mayfair and St. James's where access to power has been bought and sold. Brexit was plotted over dinner, and a Prime Minister's co-treasurer was recorded offering private access to Downing Street for £250,000 a year. Subscribe. New episode every week.